Secret Circle.
Welcome to The Secret Circle with me, Dr. Luke Decker, the podcast where I chat with authors, filmmakers, musicians, and more about the art of their craft and let you in on some of their secrets. Today's guest is Oscar De Muriel. He's the author of the thrilling Frey and McGrey novels set in broody Victorian Edinburgh. And he's also written a brand new book called The Death on the Polar Express, a incredibly fun Christmas thriller. And today we're going to let you in on some of his secrets. So without further ado, let's bring Oscar on. Oscar, welcome to the show. Welcome.
Hi, Luke. Thank you very much. I love the hat.
Thank you. I'm rocking some Blink 182, except it's now getting kind of hot in the loft, and I'm like, oh no, am I going to start getting too hot for this hat?
Well, actually, this is the only room in my house that doesn't have any heating, which is also my writing room. I didn't think that through, really.
No. You know, during the summer, I'm in the loft. My office is in the loft, so where I am.
Oh yeah,
Summertime is awful, so I basically can't work up here most summer. Wintertime is great because it's a mix, and at least I can open the window. So if I get too hot, I can at least do that.
Yeah,
but yeah. So again, it was really cool to have you on the show. One thing I always start off with when I have like a writer on is I'm always fascinated to understand everyone's different perspectives and reasons for why they decided to or feel the need to write. So that's the first question for you is why do you write? Why do you tell stories?
Well, when people ask me that for the first time, I couldn't come up with an answer, and then it took me just days to actually think why.
Yeah.
And I had to go back to like when I was really, really young, when I took a pencil for the first time, and I was like 7 when I wrote my first tiny short story.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to just having something in your mind and wanting it to exist. It's like a painter that just wants to capture something, and you just want the painting to exist, or when you see something with like photographers, you just want to capture the moment.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to share it. It's just, well, at least for me personally, it was just I just wanted the stories to exist.
Yeah.
And then I find out that I could, make a living out of it, and that's a plus. Like you can devote your life to that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I love that actually. It's funny because I get all these different kind of perspectives on that, but I like the idea of like the comparison between like a photographer, because I relate to that quite a bit because I do amateur photography. I love taking pictures, love going places. I don't really share my photos, but it's like it's for me, and I love the fact that I've captured a moment, and yeah, so I love that. That's a fun answer. I like that. So when did your writing journey begin? When did you sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna write this book and get it published, or I'm gonna write this book, and then when did you decide to pursue publishing?
Well, it was very early on. I was quite precocious in that sense, because I remember I read Jurassic Park when I was 10 years old. And I always tell the story that's the book that made me want to become a writer.
Right. Why?
I picked it up, and it was way scarier than the movie. I had seen the movie before, and I was obsessed with it. And then when I read the book, I thought, I had to put it down because I was very young, and some of the scenes are actually really scary.
Yeah.
They purposely took them out of the movie.
Yeah.
To make it more commercial, obviously. And I loved it, and I up until then I liked reading stories, and my mom read to me a lot, and but I didn't know that a book could just make you feel so scared or so excited, or make you laugh out loud. So that was when the moment that it clicked, like I want to do that. And even aged 10, 11, I was like, oh, I really want to get published. I really want to get published.
Yeah.
I sent my first manuscript to a publisher when I was 15, 16.
Wow.
And actually they commissioned me to write a short novel from that.
Wow.
But it never got published. Actually, I never told that story. I should tell it more.
Yeah. So tell me about this book. You're 15, 16, you're writing a book, and it's like a publisher's interested. Tell me about that.
Yeah, in the end, they didn't. Well, the book I sent them, it was a bit too long, not quite what they were looking for.
Right.
But they said, we like your style. We see
Yeah.
promise here. Can you write something of this length and blah blah blah?
Yeah.
And I did. It's still somewhere in the hard in some hard drive somewhere.
Yeah.
In the end, that was Mexico. So the publisher had problems, money problems, and
Ah.
they went bankrupt
Ah.
before they could actually publish it,
Damn.
which was really gutting for my
Yeah.
16-year-old, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Do you remember what the
Um,
story was about?
it was a fantasy. Well, kind of a lot of the Rings ripoff, to be quite frankly. It
It's fair
wasn't the best.
enough.
Maybe, I mean, I was 16. It wasn't it wasn't groundbreaking stuff, but
Yeah.
I was really proud of myself. It was a
Yeah.
proper, beginning, middle, and end
That's awesome.
coherent story. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I was very proud of it.
Awesome. So then, okay, so you had that. That was kind of your first kind of big experience, and then what happened after that? Did you take a break? Did you keep trying? What
I
happened
kept
next?
trying, and I think I was 22 when I moved to the UK,
Mm,
and I had tried a few. I had written a few novels, which I think were quite competent,
mm,
but I never got them published in
yeah.
Mexico. Then when I came to the UK, I kind of put the writing aside because I was doing my PhD, and you know how hard it is to do a PhD.
Yes, I do.
Congratulations on your on your doctorate, by the
Thank
way.
you very much.
No corrections. Oh my god.
No corrections. Still,
Yeah,
still
yeah.
pinching myself on that because I'm like, I'm not smart enough to do one that doesn't require corrections. Are you sure you guys got this right?
No, you have every right to brag about that.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, I put the writing aside for a little while, and then I got a job. In, this is going to show my age. I got my first job in the UK after finishing my PhD, just when the credit crunch hit.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the company that hired, I was the last hire before they had to go through the redundancy processes,
Oh,
and I was sure they were gonna sack me.
yeah,
Um, and my work permit was linked to that job, so I would have had to go
yeah.
back to Mexico. Um, but they said, "Oh, Oscar, we like your work.
Mm,
We want to keep you, but we'll reduce your hours to 3 days a week.
right.
Obviously, salary pro rata as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was way better than being unemployed
Yes,
in the middle of a financial crisis.
yes.
So I found myself with a lot of free time
Mm.
and no money to go out." And it was then that I started writing the Frey and McGrey series.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
I
And
had the idea in my mind I had it, yeah, I had it in my head for a while, but it was
yeah,
then that I found myself with the time to write it.
yeah. And when this is going on, where were you based in the UK at the time?
I was based in Manchester. Yeah, 'cause
Manchester.
I went
Okay.
to Manchester Uni, and
Yes.
then
Oh,
the
I did
job I
too.
got.
I think I can't remember if I knew that or not. Yeah, we both went to. Okay.
It must have come up at some
It
point.
must have
Yeah.
done. It must have
Yes.
done. It must have done. It's a small world. Um,
Yes. Yeah. So, and the job I got was outside, just outside of Manchester.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was,
So, because yeah, so let's we can kind of chat a little bit about Frey and McGrey then. So you're in Manchester. You're wanting to write about Edinburgh. So where does that come from? What was the desire to kind of write about Edinburgh versus Victorian Manchester?
the main reason, quite frankly, is just that I loved Edinburgh, and
Yeah.
I've never lived in Edinburgh, and a part of me doesn't want to live there because it will lose kind of a bit of the charm
Right.
once you
Yeah.
live in a place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I loved it, and I had been to Edinburgh a million times before
Yeah.
even before I thought I would write a book about, well, set in the city.
Yeah.
And it just, as soon as I had the idea, I thought it would be the perfect location, because it has all the little closes and all the
Yeah.
medieval old town, um, right next to the Georgian mansions of the new
Yeah.
town. Um, it was perfect for that kind of world.
Yeah.
with all the little alleys where you think someone's going to stab you, and
It's true.
um,
It's true.
mhm. And I didn't want to write something set in London, in Victorian London, because
Mm,
back then, well, now there's a bit more of uh, period fiction set in Scotland, but back then
yeah.
everything was set in London. It was the
Yeah.
kind of Penny Dreadful and Ripper Street kind of
Right. Yes.
years, and
Yes.
everything was London. Everything was set in London.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I really I can relate to you on the reason for writing Edinburgh. That was my first lengthy experience in Edinburgh was back in 2017, where my aunt had a fringe show for 2 or 3 weeks, which I
Oh
met
yeah, yeah,
you.
yeah,
We
yeah,
we
yeah. We've
met up at
talked about it as well.
Blackwell's. Yep, yep. And that being immersed in the city for three weeks or so, and having had one brief visit there prior to that, I was like, oh my god, I love this place. And it was from there that when I went to think about my PhD proposal, I was like, I want my story to be set in Edinburgh, but I want it to be the 1920s because I love the 1920s. And I love Edinburgh, so let's throw these things together and see what happens. But yeah, it's such a fun city that it's so like well in many ways, not always, but in many ways it's so well preserved from throughout
Mhm.
history. Like what it looks like today is not far off from what
Yeah,
a lot of it looked like 100 years ago or more.
yeah,
um
absolutely.
it's
That
just so
that reminds me
charming.
of this really funny story. When I was
Yeah.
doing research, I found this map. What Frey and McGrey said in between 1888 and 1890.
Yes.
And I found this map from a few years before. That was the
Mm,
closest I could find to the period. Um, and then I was looking for the lunatic asylum, which is part of the plot of
yeah.
the book. Um, and I went to the tourist office, and they said, "Oh yeah, you have to take this bus," which I did. And then I
Yeah.
realized I didn't know where to get off the bus. And all I had was my 1800 something map, and I was just really well, I couldn't ask the driver to could you please stop in the building that used to be the lunatic asylum in the 19th
Right.
century. Um, so I followed my 19th century map, and it took me there. I got there.
Good.
I could
It's
still
still
after
there.
like 150 years, you could still use. I know a lot of the streets have, as you said, the same names and the same layout,
Yes.
and it's really, really, really well preserved. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, which you wouldn't be able to necessarily accomplish that if you had a Victorian London map.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
that city changes so much. So what so okay, we got the idea of why you liked Edinburgh. What then inspired the story? What inspired to write you to write Frey and McGrey and build these characters?
Yeah, again, I remember the moment when I had the idea, and I think I may have told you before, but I was having a chat with some friends,
Mm,
and I can't remember the context of the conversation, but one of them said the phrase "Victorian X-Files,"
yes.
and I just stopped there, and I was like, okay, that's like bling, yeah, just that's perfect for a book series, and just from that phrase, everything snowballed. Well, as I said, I thought it's going to be, if it's going to be Victorian, it's going to be Edinburgh,
Yeah.
and then okay, so the main character has to be Scottish, at least one of them,
Yeah.
um, and everything just snowballed from there. Yeah.
I love that Victorian X Files. That's so in terms of like your background in terms of other genres and books and TV shows that you liked. Was that just a match made in heaven, or were you a big sci-fi horror fan growing up?
It kind of was. Well, it kind of was because my mom had all the Agatha Christie novels on the shelves,
Yeah.
and I started reading them when I was even, well, probably a bit too young to, you have all the murders and the infidelities and all that stuff
Yes.
that goes on in the Agatha Christie novels. Um, but I'm a huge fan of science fiction as well, and
Mm,
and fantasy, more science fiction than fantasy, but I like fantasy as well.
mm.
Um, in fact, I have a fantasy idea and a science fiction idea that I might be writing in the future, but going back, my favorite Victorian books are Dracula and The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
And just from those two, you can, after you read the Frey and McGrey, you're like, yeah, of course he's a fan of The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
And I loved having that little bit of a spooky element, the kind of
Yes.
the supernatural element. And yeah, it was just like, it was just a find.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
idea.
It's a gold. It's a golden nugget idea for
Yeah,
sure. I love
exactly.
it.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember. I for some reason I can't remember many books in terms of where I picked them up and when they came into my life. But I for some reason I remember yours. I remember being. I was living in Peckham at the time, which is in southeast London, and I was at there's like a village next to Peckham that has a giant Sainsbury's. And I went in there and I was kind of perusing the books, and you're the book cover for the Strings of Murder just kind of jumped out to me. I thought the cover looked awesome. I was big into Victorian fiction at that time. Picked it up and yeah, I devoured it. I thought it was just really cool. I still remember scenes of like the haunting violin being played, and yeah, it was such an atmospheric book. And yeah, you balance that kind of fantasy horror crime really well. I think, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you
Um,
very much.
and yeah, let's go back a little bit then. So you've got this idea. You're writing it down. What was the process like of, did you find an agent? Did you find a publisher first? Was that difficult? Was it easy, hard? What was, because everyone has such a different story when it comes to that. What was your journey?
Well, I was in the slush pile. I just had to apply to, well, send my work to literally all the agents in the book. Uh, Literally all the
Yes.
agents that said they would take fiction.
Yeah.
Um, I remember it went in. I did several batches, and the and back then you still had to submit printed. You had to print out your
Jeez,
stuff,
yeah, of course.
and sometimes I forget how it was not that long ago.
No, like we're talking like what, 10, 12 ish, maybe 13 years ago?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and I now they won't take any print
No.
print submissions.
No.
Yeah, so I put all my. It was cheaper to pay for the postage back than to print the next submission, so I always
Yeah.
got them back.
Yeah.
And then I got my agent, and then this was still during in the aftermath of the financial crisis, so
Yeah.
it took her a couple of years to find a publisher for
Yeah.
Frey and McGrey,
Yeah.
which was kind of it was kind of good because I started writing my other series, which is set in Mexico,
Yeah.
and I had the idea while it
Mhm.
was my kind of plan B.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had. I'm probably not the best person to ask how to get an agent and publisher because it took so bloody long.
Well, no, yeah, I mean that's the point is it's a
Yeah,
really grueling process. I think you
yeah,
hear these stupid stories of like, people who had it just really easy who, I don't know. Oh, I had to send it to 10 people and I had 12
and everybody
rejections.
wanted it. And
Yeah, or that. And it's just like, oh God, okay. And then you send, hundreds of submissions out and either no one responds or the five that do are like, fuck off. You're like,
yeah,
oh shit. Great. Okay. Man, what do I do? Because it is tough, and I do
yeah,
think like for a lot of people on the outside and people wanting to break in, I think it's kind of important to let them know that it's hard. It's hard. I mean, the book that I wrote for the PhD, I mean that fucker's been on submission for like a year and a half. It's come close a couple of times, but there's just it's a very difficult process. You gotta
yeah,
you just gotta find the right person at the right time to get it,
yeah,
to
exactly.
to,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
take it
absolutely.
on. And that's not
Mhm.
easy.
And even when we got the first book published with Penguin, it was uh, my agent sent it to them, and the chief editor, she liked it, but
Mm.
she didn't want to publish it.
Oh,
And her
yeah.
then assistant editor, he loved it, and then she left to a
Ah.
different publisher. Like this was like a year later, and then her assistant editor, who then became my editor, he contacted my agent asking if the book was still available,
Oh, cool.
and that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, as you said, you have to be at the right place at the right time, and it's a really unfair process. It's really subjective, and
It
yes,
is. It is. I'm always also kind of curious. This is kind of a sidebar. Is where we were 10, 12 years ago with publishing is very different to now. Now you can do it independently rather well and quite
yes.
comparable. Is
Yeah, to what it was. Mhm.
yeah, compared to what it was back then. Back then, it was still because I remember Sue Grafton got kind of raked over the coals about that time because she kind of dished um, self-publishing. She was like, oh, it's just vanity publishing, but her where she was coming from was kind of back in the 90s, early 2000s when it was quite vanity, but it was starting to emerge and try and crawl its way out of that sort of stigma at around the time that your first book was coming out, and now it's a very very different animal.
Mm.
I mean, is that ever something that, because things are so difficult with and subjective really, which is the difficulty, is I mean, is that something that would you encourage up and coming people to do first if no one is taking their book? Because is it that their book isn't good, or is it that the right person hasn't seen the book and the book is still worth being produced, I suppose, if they put the time and effort for the right editing and stuff like that?
I think it's a very difficult thing to give like a. I couldn't give like a one
Yeah,
answer, one fit for all answer.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think if I would personally still try to get my book published in the
yeah,
traditional way
yeah,
before I would self-publish.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I would listen to the feedback if you get any, because even if you
If
get, yeah, because most
if
of the times you won't get any feedback. If you get any feedback, just
Mm,
take it, that's a gold nugget. It's almost like a compliment, even if it's
yeah,
bad feedback, because
yeah,
it means they took the time
yeah,
to reply to you and give you an actual feedback. And I had quite a few of those with Frey and McGrey, even that they said, "Oh, we really like it, but
yes,
the market, blah 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 blah."
yeah, yeah,
But also in this changing of the book market, book business, book
mm,
market, um, publishers have become more cautious with what they
yeah,
take on, not less.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and now pretty much you need to have a whole fan base built up
yeah, yeah,
before they will even consider your work.
yeah.
Um, I couldn't do that
No,
today.
no.
No, if yeah, I just don't have the patience for that.
No, no. I mean, that's the thing. Like
Yeah.
nowadays, you are, and this is kind of where it's. I really understand a lot of people exploring self-publishing, particularly after they've submitted so long. It's like, well, you know what? I have the social media. I have the ability. I can just do all this myself. They're gonna require me, to do stupid fucking TikToks and stuff like that. So if I'm gonna do all this stuff and all this work, I might as well just get the
I might as
whole
well do it.
the
Yeah,
whole chunk of the
exactly.
royalty back,
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
So yeah, it is a really interesting it is an interesting thing, and I have some friends recently who have, who he was trying very hard to get his book published. It's a fantastic book. No one was taking it on, so we self-published it, and it's great. It looks good. It's a fantastic read, and I totally get why he did that, because at some point it's like, all right, if no one else is going to take it on, I think if you believe in the book, I mean, I think put it out. But it is
Exactly.
yeah, it is a complicated thing, though. It is still quite complicated, because I guess if you're talking about literary festivals and stuff like that, they might not, they still kind of don't
Yeah.
bring that person on. There's like a couple of crime writers who are self-published that are really big, like L.J. Ross and Mark,
Mhm.
what's his name? Mark, whatever the hell. I can't remember his name now. Do you know what I'm talking? Mark Dawson. Mark Dawson. There we
Gosh,
go.
yeah, yeah,
There we go.
yeah.
Those guys. They're quite huge, and they I think they kind of get some recognition, but there's others less so.
Yeah, but there's
Um,
still also like for some awards. Well, most of the awards they won't even take
no.
submissions from self-published authors,
Yeah,
which
true,
is
true.
yeah.
But the CWA, the Crime Writers Association, which I am a member of, I think you are too, maybe.
I was.
We'll just say you are. It's fine. Yeah,
I
yeah,
just yeah.
yeah. I think
Oops.
they've opened up a little bit more
Oh
to
yeah, they
to,
have a
to
category.
self,
Yeah, yeah.
and possibly I think maybe the Society of Authors has as well, which is good, which
Yeah,
is
I think
good.
that's
So
kind
it's
of yeah. It's more socially acceptable
yes,
to
yeah.
self-publish now.
Okay, so back to writing Frey and McGrey, and then I want to talk about your Christmas book. Um, you're doing historical fiction. There's these horror elements, fantasy elements, stuff like that. But there's also still, one thing I really liked about your books, was the historical detail. It felt very authentic. It felt well researched. So I suppose the question is what is kind of the for you the role of writing historical fiction then? What's the why look at the past even though you've got these kind of fantasy horror elements happening that are fun and obviously not based in reality depending on what you believe, you never know. But like yeah, what was the kind of the purpose for you of wanting to did you want to say anything about Edinburgh at that time, I guess, is the long-winded question.
Well, actually it took me a while to find the exact year I wanted to set the
Mm,
book in. Um, and ultimately it was 1888 because that was the Jack the Ripper
yes.
murders, which are
Yeah.
a bit linked with why Frey is
Yes.
sent to Scotland.
Yeah.
Because being a proper Englishman, he hates Scotland.
Yeah. Yes.
I was trying to. We had this this book chat in Mexico, and I was trying
Yeah.
to explain them how horrible it would have been for an upper class Englishman to be sent to Scotland in the
Mm,
19th century.
mm.
And I said, imagine you have an FBI agent sent to do investigations in Mexico. I mean, in present day.
Yeah.
and then he arrives in Mexico, and there's all the corruption, and there are no budget. And well, I'm Mexican, by the way, so I'm allowed to say these things. Um, so yeah,
Disclaimer.
it would be a trauma to back then. It would have been a trauma as well to go
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
Scotland because it was a
Yeah.
completely different world.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was all that fun of all the cultural differences, and also um, the books are quite well. The whole series is a bit of a marriage of contrasts.
Mm,
You have the Scottish and English, you have the upper class and the rough around the edges.
mm,
You have the debate between what's supernatural and what's scientific. And it was that kind of, it was a very brief period, like between 1880s and 18, well, probably until the 1900s,
mm,
when both kind of both ideologies both
mm.
uh, were kind of competing at it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the right words to say that if
You
you
mean like the
if you
class differences,
yeah
yeah.
no, I mean
Yeah.
the scientific thought and
Oh,
superstition.
I see. Right, right. Yes, yes,
um
yes. Yeah.
because and the best example
Science
is
versus religion versus
yeah,
spirituality
exactly.
versus yeah, yeah.
And it was that very brief period in history when they were both clashing and they were both equally strong.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if I had set it up just a few decades, just 10, 20 years before,
Yeah.
well, my Grace sister, but I should have mentioned her earlier. She's in a lunatic asylum because
Yeah.
she kills both their parents and then slices McGray's finger,
Yes.
and that's why he's nicknamed Nine Nails McGray.
Nine is yeah, yeah.
So if I had read the books just 20 years before, she would have been burned as a witch.
Right.
And if I had set it just, I don't know, like the 1920s,
Mm.
everybody would have been like, "Oh no, of course, she wasn't possessed by the devil as she claims.
Yes.
She's just mad. There's just some mental illness."
Yes.
But in the 1880s, she could still be the. Both arguments were equally strong. That's the phrase I
Yeah.
was looking for. Both
Yes.
arguments
Yes.
were equally strong.
Yes.
And the best example is Conan Doyle, because
Mm.
he was a medical doctor who studied in Edinburgh, by the way. But he also believed in seances, and he was obsessed with talking
Yes.
with the death.
Yes.
Um, and that
And
was
Houdini
what,
was like, "Come on, Arthur. Come on,
yes,
man.
exactly.
I'm exposing all these people, Arthur."
Yeah, that kind of summarizes the Frey and McGrey series
Yeah, no, I mean,
with two different men.
yeah, yeah. Oh no, I love it though. But yeah. So I like that. Like you picking that time and those in that kind of cultural clash and philosophical clash and those ideas. It's such a fun series. Um, what looking back, what's your biggest takeaway? Because you recently brought the series to a conclusion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true. It was always meant to be a
Mm,
closed. It
yeah,
was never going to be an open-ended series. I was
right.
had in mind that uh, it will be this many books, and
Right.
the reason why McGray's sister kills their parents
Right.
is not fully revealed until the very last book.
Oh, right. Yes.
In a very Harry Potter kind of style.
Yeah.
And then in each book, I give a bit of extra clues. Each book is an individual case, and you
Yes.
can read them pretty much standalone-ish.
Yeah.
You don't have to read them in order, actually.
Yeah.
Um, but I give a little bit of a clue in each book
Yeah. A
as
subtle,
to why.
subtle arc
Yeah,
going through the whole. I
yes,
like that. Yeah.
and everything just comes to conclusion in the last book. Uh, so what uh, I particularly liked, my two favorite books, quite frankly, are I can't decide between books 4 and 5.
Mm,
So the book 4, I think, has the nicest twist in the
mm.
series. That
Don't spoil it now.
no,
For
no,
anyone
no, no,
listening who
no.
might not have read your book, let's not spoil anything. But yes,
That was called Loch of the Dead,
yes,
and yeah, almost every page has a clear clue
yeah,
as to what's going on,
yeah,
and it's also the book before was really complicated to write, and the twists are quite complex. But in Lock of the Dead, it's a very simple twist,
yeah,
and it's there all the time, and it's still, modesty aside, I managed to keep it. It's a proper explosion when the
yeah,
when the big reveal.
yeah.
And book 5, that's when there's this seance
Mm,
hosted by McGray's best friend, Madame Katerina, who is one of
yeah,
my favorite characters ever, who owns a brewery on the ground floor, and then the up floor is her divination room.
yeah,
So get them drunk and then read their
yeah.
future. Um, so she hosts this seance, and the following day, everyone in the room's dead except her.
Mm,
So it's a courtroom drama with
yeah,
McGrey, because she's obviously accused of the murders,
yeah.
and it's a courtroom drama, and it's a proper race against time. And
Mm,
again, I like that I think it's the most streamlined plot,
mm,
and because there's that race against time,
yeah,
the tension is always ramping up throughout the
yeah,
book,
yeah,
and it was a joy. That was probably the one I enjoyed writing the most.
yeah.
It just almost wrote itself.
Yeah. I love this series. They're fun and I like returning to them when I can. Everything I've always been a big fan. And I highly recommend it.
Mm,
But
thank you.
let's move on and talk about Death
Yes.
on the Polar Express. Love this little book. There you go. Love the cover. Let's talk about the cover first. I mean, this cover is awesome. And you did the illustration. You painted that.
I did illustration, yes. And that was from my childhood dream of writing my books and illustrating and doing the covers for my own books. So
Yes.
it's the first time I can actually do it. I mean, I was very lucky with the Frey and McGrey covers because
Oh, they're really
they're
stinking cool,
amazing,
man.
and they did lots of really really cool stuff that
Yeah.
and really groovy stuff that I would have never dreamed of.
Yes. In a world
Um,
where so many books look the same, I think that again that was why the
Absolutely,
strings of murder
yes,
jumped out to me. And all of
yeah.
them ever since has. I mean, I also think the darker arts is a fantastic cover. I love anyway. They're very good
Like
covers.
yeah, because I was really looking at that, but for this one, I thought, oh yeah, I have to read at one point.
Yeah.
It was almost not non-negotiable.
I love it. It's got such a I don't know. It's just like badass Santa. I
Badass
love it.
Santa, yes.
I love it.
And it was inspired actually. That's where the idea of the book came from. There
Mm,
was this caricature, I think it was from the 1920s,
mm.
of the Puck magazine, um, um, and the cover was Santa with a gun
Okay.
pointing at the
Ah,
camera, uh, and it was yeah, that just kind of inspired the whole thing.
oh, I
And
love that. So, okay, so what inspired? So you finished up Frey and McGrey. What was the inspiration to move from Edinburgh? Victorian Edinburgh, crime, horror, fantasy elements to a Christmas crime novel. What? Yeah.
Christmas crime novel.
Mm.
My agent gave me the perfect answer to that, and he said, "Oscar is like you took a year off after uni and went out to do really wacky, crazy stuff."
Yeah.
Because and that's the perfect answer because um, the Frey and McGrey series took a lot of planning,
Yes.
and some of the twists, the final twist in book 7, I had worked that out from book 1,
Mm.
even before book 1 was ready. The conclusion was already worked out,
Yeah.
and quite a bit of the final scenes was also mapped out.
Yes.
And then just the execution was a nightmare because I had to go through notes of like that were like 15 years old,
Yeah.
and make sure that all the little clues in all the books matched. And
Yeah.
my reference books, I went from historical books to using my own series as the reference books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it took a lot of like mental effort, and then I thought I want to write just something. Uh, I want to write something standalone,
Yep.
still challenging,
Mm.
but I want to write something standalone that I can just plot it in within a few months, weeks, um, and I can and something that I will just enjoy from like every single page.
Yeah.
Um, and I literally enjoyed, I think, every line, every paragraph. Uh,
Yes.
I love it's. I don't want to say some. No, it was a very personal, like a gift to myself. Like
Mm.
I've been writing about gruesome murders and really dark stuff.
Yes.
Um, so I know I want to bring out my funny side. Which there's a lot of comedy in the Fire and McGrey books as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But this is much more comedy, and I just laughed out loud when I was writing it, and because I wrote it between Christmas and March, so it was like 3 months,
Mm.
and I would have a little glass of something before I started writing it every evening.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Santa was interesting particularly at the beginning of the novel.
Probably I should probably give a bit of the blurb or
Yeah,
what
yeah,
what
yeah,
the book's
sure, yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, because basically one of Santa's elves gets murdered,
Yes.
and it's not just any elf. He's the head of the elves union, who has been fighting for the elves' rights in the workplace for years, and
Mm.
he's been clashing with Santa for years. And then the elves, of course, they're outraged, and the ultimatum is that if Santa can't find the culprit before Christmas, they will strike,
Yeah.
and nobody will deliver the toys that year.
Yep. Yes. It was again. It's a fun, just ticking clock
Yep.
story. Um, and in general, like Christmas stories, a lot of Christmas stories have a ticking clock element to them.
Yeah,
Um,
it has to be before Christmas. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I wondered if was that. Did you go in with that mindset of a lot of Christmas stories have this, or was it just by chance? Or I mean, everyone loves the idea of Christmas being canceled and having to thwart the cancellation of Christmas.
it was a bit of the stuff I learned while doing the Frey and McGrey. Because as I said,
Yeah,
the Dark Arts book, where there's this race against time to save Madame Katerina,
yeah,
and that sets the plot for the rest of the
yeah,
book. So this as well, I very consciously use that
yeah.
element as well. The murder takes place on the 21st, 23rd of December.
23rd, 23rd. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So Santa only has like a few hours, well,
yeah,
less than 2 days to solve the case.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was very conscious decision to do it that way.
So Sans again, he's very sort of. It's interesting at the beginning because you have this clash, and like you think of Santa as this warm, you know,
Warm fuzzy,
jolly
yeah, jolly guy,
guy,
yeah,
and then we see this kind of this. You've did this sort of darker side of Santa, where the elves are uh that they're kind of exploited labor a little bit. They're
a
really
little bit, yeah.
unhappy. Yeah, they're unhappy with their wages, where they're living, all that kind of stuff. They're I think there's a line where, like, the reindeer have a better accommodation than the
Than the elves,
than
yeah.
the elves. So yeah, so I was wondering kind of what inspired that particular element. What why did you want to take that angle with Santa being this kind of capitalist jerk a little bit.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends was asking me if her 10-year-old boy could read it, and I said yes. There are more jokes about capitalism than about sex,
Yeah.
and um, and yeah, yeah, Santa is he's well, of course he has his massive house, and
Yes.
the elves. That was my favorite idea was that the elves live in this valley that now it's flooded because of
Mm.
global warming. Because the poles are melting now. Now the elves' houses are half flooded,
Yeah.
and Santa doesn't have enough resources to rebuild the whole town. Um, it's actually one of the things that really worry me of modern day life.
Mm.
All this
Yeah.
capitalist versus socialism.
Yeah.
But I've always seen myself as a very center person, and
Mm.
I do have I do add the dark side of Santa, as you said, that he kind
Yeah.
of explodes the elves, but then I explain all the burden that he has
Yes.
because he has to look after the elves. He has to manage the whole North Pole operation.
Yeah.
Um, there's all these incredibly high expectations on Santa. He has to be always jolly, always merry, and always fuzzy and lovey-dovey.
Yeah.
Um, and he's uh, a bit weary,
Mm-hmm.
a bit disillusioned, and, uh, and so I wanted to have those both sides
Yeah.
because he's still quite jolly in the book, and
He
he
is. Yes.
and you can still see that he cares about
Yes.
the elves,
Yeah.
and it's I quite like that because it's a very complex
Mm.
clash of elements. I I really think a modern day Santa would be like that.
Yeah. When I was reading it, I kept thinking that this version of Santa, he's quite hard boiled. Like
It's
you
quite
could
hard
kind
boiled,
of
yeah.
You can kind of see him with like like the Philip Marlowe. He's kind of like a Philip Marlowe-esque, Sam Spade-esque, who is a good guy, but he's a
Yeah, a bit
tarnished
jaded. Yeah,
individual.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I just found so fun. What was the research process like for this particular novel? Like, were you like deep diving into like Christmas lore? Because there's Christmas like on every single page. So much like little fun little nods and references and jokes and things. Like, yeah, how did you
Yeah,
go
that
in and
was
like pick the stuff that you wanted?
well. Actually, one of the reasons I wanted to write it was because I said I'm not going to do any research, and I ended up doing a lot of research
Okay, I
anyway.
was gonna say.
um, so I did a lot of research on the most famous and most popular toys of the 20th century,
Yep,
which quite a few are mentioned in the book.
yep.
Like the Johnny Seven, which is the
Johnny
murder
Seven, yeah,
weapon, it did exist, and
yep.
I did find the actual TV ad for the Johnny Seven,
Oh, awesome.
which is quite well. I didn't do anything to it. I just described it
Yeah.
as it was. And the Super Mario Brothers game that
Yep.
there was a shortage of chips that
Yes.
year,
Yes.
and the worst tragedy in the world that was that it couldn't be delivered on time for Christmas.
Yep.
Bless the 90s, because that was the worst tragedy we could
No
think of.
kidding, right? Jeez.
Yes.
I get why people are
Um,
nostalgic for the '90s now.
oh yeah, yes, exactly, yes. Um, and also all the songs and all there are lots of Christmassy puns, but
Yes.
they're good puns.
Mm.
I hope,
There
like
they are. They're
when
good.
when uh, Rudolph kicks Santa in the frosticles,
Yeah.
um, and the partridge, the 12 days of Christmas, when every little line is actually a sexual innuendo.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
I had loads of fun going through the Christmas songs and seeing how I could uh,
Play with them. Yeah.
play with that. Yeah, so that was my research, just sitting with a glass of something, listening to Christmas songs and looking for
Yeah.
innuendos in them.
I swear. I mean, I think there's every once in a while one will stumble upon a book and you can tell every page was a joy, and I think it reminded me as I was reading. It reminded me of. I mean, some of my favorite films are crime and like Christmas adjacent, like things like Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. They're all kind of tough crime novels, but set around the
Set
jolly
around Christmas,
goodness
yeah.
of Christmas time. Um, are those films at all an influence on you? Did you revisit anything like that when you were writing this book?
I rewatched the Chevy Chase Christmas
Oh,
movie, which
Christmas
I can't.
Vacation.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I was gonna say I can't remember the title, but of course it was Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, yeah.
um, um, yeah, I rewatched all the must-haves. Home Alone. Which was the other one I watched? I reread A Christmas Carol.
Right. Yep.
Uh, yeah, all the ones you usually go for at Christmas. And I quite like. I inserted this bit. It's a Christmas tradition for me to watch either the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit.
Same. Every Christmas we do Lord of the Rings. Yes.
And then Santa, after he delivers the toys, he says that his favorite way to just lay down, sit back, is just watch the Hobbit trilogy.
Yes.
Just spot all the inconsistencies and all the ways they dragged out the plot.
Yes.
So yeah, I was. I'm really hoping. Well, this is going to be one of my family's Christmas tradition. We will sit
Yeah.
every Christmas and listen to the audiobook in our pajamas.
Oh, I love that. That's fun. That's fun.
Yeah.
How long is the audiobook? Because it's I mean it's a kind of like the book is rather compact,
Yes.
and it's like 200 and some odd pages, but it's a compact book. How
Yeah,
long would the audiobook be?
it's just on the. It's like 2.5 hours. So it's
Oh, that's
yeah,
perfect.
it's a short book. It's kind of designed to be read after Christmas
Yeah.
dinner when you're you're completely stuffed and you can't do anything, and you just
Yeah. That was, I
sit back and
like that
enjoy.
about
Yeah,
this, and thinking about things like A Christmas Carol. Like some of these like classics are digestible within a short
yeah,
period of time.
yeah. You can
They're
read them
not,
in an
yeah.
afternoon. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so I love that this is a nice little kind of slice of Christmas. It's not an intimidating book by any means. I mean, for me, a 400 word book, a page is 400 word lol, 400 page book
I
is
wish they were
intimidating.
that long. They could be that long. That would be very quick to write.
Would No kidding. Would you are you is there ideas for would you want to do a sequel to this in the future, or do you just want to leave this, this alone as this wonderful little one-off Christmas, thriller?
Well, it's one of those that because the ending is a bit open ended
Yes.
without saying more spoilers.
Yes.
It's one of those that it just worked that way when I wrote
Yeah.
it. And you think, oh, maybe there's something there, but a couple of ideas. I've had a couple of ideas, like when you're in the shower, but I'm not really
Yeah.
thinking like formally of doing a
Yeah.
sequel. Um, I really enjoyed the audiobooks. I have to say we're releasing them both in Spanish and English at the same time.
Right.
Actually,
Right.
the same actor that did the Frey and McGrey books, he's doing
Oh,
the audiobook. Well, he's
cool.
already recorded, so they're just editing the last few bits. So it's going to be
Awesome.
out very very soon. So yeah, I think I'm quite happy with it as it is, because it was,
Yeah.
as I said, it was a real joy, and as a present to myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the time being,
Cool.
yeah, I'm happy leaving it
Cool.
as
Cool.
it is.
What's Okay, two questions. Were there any sort of, because again it's very different to Frey and McGrey. What was there any sort of worry or concern, or was difficulty going from something like that to something like this and getting it, published, or was it just sort of like, easy? What
I
was?
I didn't when I started it. It wasn't in the plans to publish it.
Oh, okay.
I literally I just
Yeah.
wrote it for myself.
Right. Right.
And I mentioned it to my German publisher,
Mm,
and they said, "Oh no, yeah, we want it.
awesome.
We'll do the audiobook, and we'll do it in Spanish and English." And yes, it was, yeah,
Wonderful. Oh, that's good. The
yeah.
Germans, they do have a sense of humor.
They do, yes, and they love really wacky books. That's what I love about
Yes,
them.
yes, because
Yes,
that's the thing. That's what I was thinking about when I when you first started talking about this book, and then having read it, I think about, like, there's a bunch of books coming out right now that are Christmassy, crimey related, and they're all very sort of like, none of them interest me. They're it's like typical stuff, like, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to name names or point fingers, but I'm just like, it's basically the typical book. It just has Christmas on the cover,
yeah,
and we see it time and time again.
yeah. It could be
Um,
just any murder, just it in Christmas at Christmas
yeah,
time. Yeah, that's fine.
yeah. So I love the fact that, like, I love odd books that do fun things, and this is just that. I wish I wish publishers in the U.S. and the U.K. took a little bit more risk with certain things, and were
Yeah.
willing to do, because this is just so fun. Um, where will people be able to purchase this book?
Well, it's going to be on Audible in, as I said, Spanish and English.
Mm,
I think there might be a German version next year
awesome,
as well, and also as an ebook that will be also available through my German publisher.
great.
We printed out just a few hundred
Mm,
hardbacks like the one I sent you.
yes,
And again, that was my whim, because I wanted to have it this size.
yes, this is so
It's
cool.
an A6 or is it
Yes,
A5?
maybe five.
So it's tiny.
Yes.
Um, and we still it was pretty much more like to um uh, almost like a publicity, to
Mm,
help the publicity do it. But if people want them, you can contact me on my social media, and
awesome, awesome.
we can sort something out.
Well, I love the fact that I'm lucky enough to have one of the few printed copies, because this is truly wonderful, truly wonderful. Oscar, we got to wrap up, but I had a lot of fun talking about Edinburgh, horror, fantasy, crime, Christmas. Where can people find you online? You know, if maybe they want to get the physical copy from you, maybe they just want to follow you. Where can people find you online if you want them to?
Well, I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Oscar De Muriel, everything together, just one word.
Nice.
And I'm very good at replying. I'm also on Facebook, but I hate the Facebook interface. So if you find me there, it might take me a little bit longer to reply.
Yeah.
I will eventually, but Instagram and Twitter, because I refuse to call it X.
I do too.
I'm very good at replying.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And also for anyone listening, there will be links to Oscar's website and places where you can buy the Frey and McGrey books and all that kind of stuff in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube, or in the description if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify. So go check out Oscar's books. You will not be disappointed, and find him on social media. Yeah, Oscar, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming in, and look forward to having you back in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. Always a pleasure.
Nice. And everyone who listened, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
The Secret Supper.